So I guess no one will.
Well, he had sent a couple of emails. His first email pretty much laid out why he wanted to do it and what his experience was and all of those things. And I was that you hadn't received that, forwarded that to you. So he seems well qualified.
I saw that. That's why I wanted him to say it. Yeah, you can write anything you want. So.
Anything else? Good. Okay, I'm unsure. You brought mine. You brought your guy to speak for you. Okay, next I think we're going to move to Chief Ward. He's going to discuss 2022 fireworks restrictions.
We're going to do
Unfortunately, we're going to do the petition overpass study.
Oh, excuse me, yeah, I misread that.
Okay.
Steve Jackson, I believe, can help us with that. 2200 West pedestrian overpass.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate everybody letting us take a few minutes here. With me tonight I have Adam Birdsall and Michael Baker with Parametrics. They're a consulting firm that specializes in rail crossings for work that we need them for. And so we've been looking at 2200 West, the rail crossing there just south of Antelope Drive, and some of the feasibility studies and alternatives that maybe need to be done here to improve some safety. So we started this a long time ago, back in 2021 actually, with working with the railroad. We had a meeting in March of 2022 trying to just put in some basic sidewalk, and we're shut down pretty hard on that. And so now we've enlisted the experts over here to kind of take a deeper dive into things and look at that. UDOT has partnered with us to give us some funding to get this feasibility study done. So I'm going to turn the time over to Adam to jump through these slides with us, and then kind of give everybody an overview of what we've been doing. And then at the end, I think we'd like to just maybe get a head nod from the council that we're headed in the right direction, and then we can kind of pursue this down the road. So right now we're at like a 30% concept phase of what we think is the feasibility. So Adam, why don't you jump up here and we'll give you the chair and
Okay.
sit by you here. And
Share of power.
yeah.
Well, I guess the mayor's on the phone,
There's
council members, and everyone else here. I'm grateful for the opportunity to present to you our findings of the 2200 West at-grade railroad crossing feasibility study and alternatives analysis. As Steve said, my name is Adam Birdsall. I'm with Parametrics. I'm the structures group lead for our office here in Utah. Been working at this for a decade and a half, have quite a few bridges under my belt, so I have a lot of experience with these kind of projects. Also have with me Michael Baker. Introduce yourself.
I'm a transportation planner with Parametrics as well. I do a lot of rail crossing feasibility analyses, facilitation for UDOT and railroad crossing diagnostic review meetings and all of that. So,
Great. Yeah. So we'll be kind of tag teaming this presentation. Michael's going to go through the alternatives or feasibility study, and I'll take on the alternatives analysis. But before we get into that, just going to give you a little introduction to the project itself. This is the crossing 2200 West running north-south, and you can see the railroad tracks running from the southeast to the northwest. And the purpose of our project is to investigate alternatives for improving the safety of this crossing, as Steve mentioned already. In our presentation here is just going to be a summary of the feasibility study. We performed the alternatives analysis. We subsequently performed concluding the alternatives considered and the corresponding impacts of those alternatives, and what our recommendation is in conjunction with the city after we had performed all of that work. So just a little view of the site. North-south running collector is 2200 West. We also have a sidewalk on the west side that runs along 2200 West. We also have at the at-grade crossing, you guys don't care what the at-grade crossing number is, but there it is for you. A little useless trivia. But we have 2 Union Pacific Railroad tracks, as well as an existing front runner track running along the corridor, and there is a future second front runner track that they wanted us to accommodate as well, running on the north side of the rail corridor. So, site safety concerns. The first one is the big one, a large skew For those of you who are unfamiliar with what the word skew means, it's the difference in angle from a orthogonal or 90-degree crossing. So if you have the blue line, which is 2200 west, a 90-degree crossing would be the green line. The red line is the actual crossing, and that angle between the green and red line is what the skew is. So the crossing angle is really sharp, and it leads to a longer distance to cross the tracks, and that obviously prolongs the amount of exposure that vehicles or pedestrians have as they try and cross the tracks to a collision with a train. In addition, the steep crossing angle also is problematic for sight distance, whether it be for vehicles or for pedestrians seeing oncoming trains. Basically, the pedestrians have to get a lot closer to the track to see the trains, and similarly the cars, they have a stop bar that shows them where to stop, but it's because of the minimum offsets that the UP requirements have, it's set back really far and it's really hard to see. In addition to that, the sidewalk is discontinuous at this crossing, and so it forces pedestrians either onto the street right next to vehicular traffic, or off the street and away from the actual crossing itself, crossing over the tracks, not at the at-grade crossing, which in either case is unsafe. Other effects or impacts that we reviewed as a part of our feasibility study include the traffic disruption and delay caused by the at-grade crossing, and the impact that could potentially have on emergency services response times. So with that, I'm going to turn the time over to Michael. He's going to talk a little bit more about feasibility study here.
Oh, amazing. Thanks, Adam. All right. Okay, cool. So methodology for how we perform this. We installed traffic cameras at the railroad crossing for 1 week in time. And this was in October or late September, early October of 2022. Typically, it coincided nicely where we had school was in session, and also it's a time of year that's very busy with rail traffic as well. We collected video footage 24 hours a day at the crossing and observed our dates there. We recorded crossing activities by active transportation users, so people-powered transportation, scooters, bicyclists, pedestrians, skateboarders. We also looked at commercial motor vehicles because of vertical grades, as well as freight trains, and we observed front runner crossings as well. We also noted any dangerous crossing behaviors that we observed, and our main goal was to determine the traffic obstruction caused typically by trains, and also impacts on emergency services as well, travel times and that. So you're going to see a whole bunch of charts and all of that, and for the sake of brevity and not boring everyone to death, we have full details and everything here. But in short, here was our train activity that we observed. On the top, we have our daily train totals by traffic totals by transportation mode. We had active transportation, those people powered peaked on Tuesday, commercial motor vehicles highest on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday, predominantly northbound. We also looked, and you can see that in the lower chart there with commercial motor vehicles. We also observed dangerous crossing behaviors, and we made note of those. If you'll forgive the Bigfoot sighting quality screenshots of these images here. We noted instances where pedestrians there in the lower right were crossing away. There was no safe crossing location, so they're crossing over the rails, which is highly dangerous when you're not wearing proper PPE or personal protective equipment. We observed vehicles stopping past the gates, but fortunately there was enough space for them to stop without having any more dire incidents. We also observed a vehicle making a U-turn at the gate, saw a small fender bender as well, and also pedestrians having to walk very closely to the travel lanes, and quite hairy right there. Here's our summary of our freight train and front runner traffic. Is highest on Fridays and Saturdays, generally fairly consistent. Front runner fairly evenly directionally split with, of course, lower traffic on Saturday and virtually nothing on Sunday. And they do operate trains on Sundays during off times. So this was the average crossing activation time per day during our observation period. So on an average per day, freight was occupying it for about 60 minutes. Front runner closed it for 45 minutes. So in short, you got freight trains, low frequency but high duration, and you've got front runners, which is high frequency, low duration of closures. And we also observed some malfunctions at the gates as well. We also performed an analysis on the impacts on emergency services. We used GIS network analysis to estimate the impacts of response times going from the 2 nearest fire stations, incorporated input as well from the Layton City Fire Department as well as the North Davis Fire District. So we had them responding to 2 hypothetical emergencies, one at 2200 West and Antelope Drive and one at 10th North and 2200 West, and compared the differential impacts if the crossing was closed and if it was open. We analyzed going as well from both. There's a temporary North Davis Fire District station in the Freeport Center, but also we analyzed the future location where they're currently building it. The route destinations, hypothetical, and compared the routes and travel times when the crossing was opened and when it was blocked to just understand that. So kind of long and the short of this is a whole bunch of numbers is that northbound traffic, there were actually impacts, both a delay of about at a minute and a half and traveling an additional third of a mile or so. The reverse direction when they're providing backup, same thing, a little bit further distance, about 4.4 miles, and then about 50 seconds added on to emergency response. We also analyzed if it was faster to detour or wait for the train to pass, but it's generally a pretty hairy operation because there's not an opportunity for a fire truck to turn around, and so detouring seems to always be the preferable option. So in conclusion, we did find that there were impacts, they were, given the high number of pedestrians and kids that were crossing there, as well as the unsafe behaviors that we observed, we agreed that it was really advisable to progress with the alternatives analysis. So, and I think Adam will take us through that.
As Michael mentioned, if you are interested in the numbers, we do have the feasibility study available, presented out to the city, so you can dig into those numbers more fully if you wish. I'm going to go into the alternatives analysis at this point. There are 4 alternatives we considered: an at-grade crossing, restricted, I should say, at-grade pedestrian crossing, a pedestrian overpass, a full-grade separated crossing, and closing the crossing altogether. So as Steve mentioned, there was a diagnostic review meeting in March 2022. And at that meeting, they identified the safety concerns we've already kind of talked about. In addition to what I mentioned, they also mentioned that, for bicyclists crossing at that sharp angle, the angle of the tracks and the panels would potentially cause an issue for a bicyclist. You can imagine that you might keep your wheel stuck. Anyway, the thought there at the meeting and what we continued to confirm as we went through the alternatives analysis was that the cost associated with that at-grade pedestrian crossing did not really provide significant safety improvements, so it didn't really validate that cost. So we kind of ruled out that option. Similarly, we talked with the city about the feasibility of closing the crossing altogether, and that was not feasible. So we just removed those 2 alternatives right off the bat. So the 2 remaining alternatives, we have a pedestrian overpass and the full grade separated crossing. Some design criteria we had as we looked through those alternatives, we needed to clear span the UPR right of way and provide minimum clearances as shown there. We needed to stay within the right-of-way and outside existing curb and gutter to not impact the existing roadway. And we needed to meet ADA requirements for the pedestrian overpass. For the fully grade separated crossing, similar criteria: span the right-of-way, provide the clearance. We also looked at providing the full typical section for the collector that 2200 West is listed as for the Layton City Master Plan. So that's what we did. And do our best to minimize right-of-way and utility impacts. And as you'll see, that was pretty much impossible. So this is our pedestrian overcrossing layout for our preliminary design. We laid out you can't really see it very well on the slide, but we had a 265-foot main span using a steel truss that clear spanned the right-of-way. We had concrete ramps tying into the steel truss. On the west side, not on the west side, on the north side, the grade comes up to meet the ramps a little faster, so we were able to have a shallower slope on the south side. We had to chase grade a little bit, so it was a steeper slope that required some landings. But it worked. We got it to tie in okay. We also tried to utilize retaining walls to minimize the structure as much as possible. There are some limitations to how tall those retaining walls can be depending on how narrow it is, but we were able to utilize retaining walls for portions of the ramp. Another thing to notice is we also looked at potentially realigning the bridge to cross a little more directly over the tracks. As we did so, we found that there were some benefits, but there were also some negatives to doing that. So we have the shorter span, obviously, which is a positive, but the sidewalk only runs on the west side of the street right now, so we'd have to connect the sidewalk and do additional grading and sidewalk work on the east side to connect it to Antelope or any other sidewalk. In addition, there's overhead power running on the east side of the street we'd have to relocate. One of the concerns we were thinking about was, obviously having a ramp and a bridge right above people's backyards may create some privacy concerns. So this layout would kind of double the amount of properties impacted by those concerns, in addition to having to get temporary construction easements from those property owners as well. But regardless, we found that considering the pros and the cons of both, they kind of washed out. So we figured we would just proceed with the western alignment, and roughly the cost should be close to about $6 million is what we came up with. There's a cost estimate broken down for you. So that's the pedestrian overcrossing, about $6 million. This is the grade separated crossing here. Similar layout, clear spanning the railroad. Because it's a wider section, it means it's a longer bridge. It's nearly 300 feet from what we laid out. You can't really see in that typical section over there, but the depth of the superstructure of the bridge was needing to be around 13 feet. So that, in addition to the vertical clearances that we need to attain, meant that we need to build up fill or change the profile of 2200 West to be 27 feet higher than existing is right now. And the issue with that, along with the total width of the corridor, is that we have significant right-of-way and access impacts. And what that really looks like is, if you were to look at this in Google Earth, there are accesses to the subdivisions north and south of this crossing that are roughly 300 to 500 feet from this crossing. And the approaches for this bridge would run 800 feet to the north and 1,500 feet to the south. So that the approach with the MSC walls on the south would not only obstruct Demetra Drive, but it also obstructs the two other accesses to the south of that. So significant, obviously, significant disruption. If you wanted to, let me go back here. If you wanted to realign the bridge to cross at a better angle. The problem with that is that now you have to realign 2200 and you're gonna blow through 10 to 15 properties to be able to do an S-curve and get it to go over the track at a shorter span. And so that's another significant issue. We didn't put a cost to that alternative. We just put together some materials costs for that 300 foot span, and it comes out around $34 million. Obviously a very significant cost. So with all that background, the recommendation as we presented this information to the engineering staff and Steve Jackson, we came to consensus that pedestrian overpass is our preferred alternative. It provides safety improvements for pedestrian and bicyclists who want to cross while limiting the amount of right-of-way, temporary construction easements required. There are some utility impacts. There will be some utility relocations required, but we are able to connect the sidewalk west of 2200 West, and we don't need to impact the roadway access. By that I mean the Demetro Drive and the other accesses to the subdivisions north and south of the crossing, the ramps and tie-in before we get to that point. So this is a look at our 30% plans, a little cleaner view of the bridge, what it would look like. Here's a rendering we put together. We've got a visualization group that does a great job of making things look pretty and what it actually looks like in place. So there's a view of it in place. With that, next steps, should the City Council be amenable to our recommendation, we would work with Layton City, UDOT to pursue funding for the overpass. Once funding is secured, Layton City can procure final design engineering services and refine the options for the pedestrian overpass we kind of mentioned before, which alignment would be most cost efficient. And also, you could also look into other structure types such as, we showed a truss, but you could also do a box girder or some other pedestrian structure type. That would be part of the final design process. And then move to advertising and construction. So with that, are there any questions for us at this time?
Yeah. So you're coming across on the west side.
Yeah. I will scroll up.
Right. So from the northern half, there's nothing there. No houses, there's one house.
It's current RV storage area.
place.
What?
RV storage.
Yeah, and there's the storage there, but I mean, if you got kids crossing, they're gonna have to cross twice. They're gonna cross the bridge, and then if they wanna go to where the homes are, they gotta cross the road. Now, whether that be up at Antelope, I mean, but then the other thing too is they're building, 500 units?
Destination homes.
Destination homes. So that's gonna dump out somewhere. Is that figured in? I'm sure it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as far as the traffic and everything.
And you mentioned access. It'll be a different access point.
Yeah, it's south of here. It's
Yeah.
closer to the rail trail.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So to your point about crossing, like I said, we could cross and go straight, stay on the west side, or we could bump over
Yeah,
to the
it's
east.
kind of 6 is 1 heaven,
Yeah. So I mean, you'd have to, like I said, construct new sidewalk on the east side. Get all that taken care of. That's an option
From on the north.
on the north side.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And so that's certainly an option. And as I said, that can be refined once you get into the final design as to which is the preferred alternative.
Yeah, and I don't know, I'm thinking of kids, where they're gonna go.
Sure.
They're either gonna go to the Rainbow, whatever it's called, Rainbow Oil, the gas station across the way, because you can go get candy there. Or are they gonna come up on that side and go through Bayview Park to, not park, but the area there, I don't know.
Well, and the concern here is mainly who's gonna cross the tracks.
Well,
Let's
yeah.
give them a safe way to get across the tracks so that they're not.
And I don't know how much kids would cross, I mean,
We were witnessing the entire cross-country team from Clearfield High using this before we brought it to our attention, so.
yeah,
there are-
but they could change.
Yeah, they have
Yeah,
changed,
yeah.
but we have seen quite a few pedestrians using
Okay.
this that are coming from the north.
And over the grade crossing, there's no designated
No. there's
pedestrian realm, the panels don't extend far enough over, so,
nothing. Yeah,
yeah, you are having, folks stepping between the rails,
oh,
which is
yeah, no,
really, the rails are dangerous.
Seen it
There's
for
like,
years.
I've got some questions, concerns, I guess.
Sure.
When we first talked about this, and maybe not for you per se, but more for the staff, thank you for the presentation. When we first talked about it, and I didn't remember until I emailed Steve, that we were talking about with UDOT and UP trying to figure out put a sidewalk, and you mentioned that's part of the options. Seems like a very expensive project for the amount of people that are actually crossing there to me. And I number one. Number two, isn't that Clearfield? It's not Layton.
Only the west
No,
side.
it's like,
West side's
The
Clearfield.
road is ours, but the west side is Clearfield just to Demetrio Drive.
Okay.
So yeah, it's,
So we've got a partner.
Yeah.
We haven't talked about that. UP, are they a partner when you talk about funding? UP, UDOT, Clearfield, part of us. It
that's,
seems like,
that's what the
Like-
plan is to see federal funding is usually available for these types of safety improvements, and then UDOT is obviously a partner to try and increase the safety at these locations as well.
what I want to be careful of is saying that we were looking at a sidewalk solution and we can't do that. Well, then what about a bridge? And what about a bigger bridge? And what about and it seems like it's got really expensive really fast.
And that's where we came back and said, hey, is the road, because I would love to build a full-on bridge and road across this thing, but I don't think that we can justify spending that kind of money for what the improvement needs to be for safety. The pedestrian bridge, you're right, it's not cheap, but at the same time, it solves the pedestrian safety problem that is going to be here until something is done. But UP, the railroad, essentially at that meeting said, no way, you're not putting a sidewalk across here. To be honest, their response was just close this road. That was it. And I'm like, there's 8,000 plus cars a day on this road. We aren't closing the road that is the main collector for this entire area, but.
And the concern for safety.
Exactly.
Did they,
Yeah.
were they
They expressed the concern for safety, but they're
not?
freight movers, they're not, yeah, I'm just gonna be that blunt.
The boardroom's not voted on.
Yeah, so I agree with you, and that's where we want to pursue all the avenues we can to get assistance for this type
And
of safety
you're thinking,
improvement.
that potentially you could fund it with federal funds?
That's the plan, is we would work with parametrics to provide some grant assistance writing for us to go after some of these pretty large, they have a lot of federal railroad safety improvement funds out there, and we would pursue those to be able to do this.
yeah, both state and federal as well.
Yeah.
Just one thing also, the limited number of pedestrians is at this point actually a good thing, because it's highly dangerous, and so there is kind of a field of dreams. If you build it, they will come sort of aspects to it, so it is a little bit more difficult to quantify that. You know, right now it is a fairly dangerous pedestrian crossing. I've inventoried it before, and even wearing like full-on reflective vest and hard hat and everything, I didn't really feel that safe, and so it's kind of those sort of future effects that are a little bit harder to quantify.
Timelines, I mean, I know it's the railroad, so timelines times two, but how is it gonna coincide with the destination development? And my guess is that, I mean, can you access the destination development from the north? Can you?
Yeah, there'll be a connection to the.
So, are you anticipating there being greater numbers of traffic? I mean, I guess I'm just curious about the time frame about when we think this, you know, I know you can't give me exact figures, but kind of where the destination homes development and this would be coincided. Is destination gonna be there first?
Yes. I think that's an easy yes. They will probably be done long before we can.
The holiday.
Where are they walking to? I mean, it's like, it's not, they're not going to school.
No.
Walking to.
They're not going to school.
How many kids you have?
There's a bus route up on Antelope too that we see a lot of. There's people that are using it as a commuting route to walk up and down. And then, yeah, the kids, I don't know, kids are kids, they go all over the place, but.
They do. I see, I mean, I don't know how many, but there's a lot of Job Corps kids that cut right down there and go down 2200 because of the park and different things.
My feeling is that pursuing it with the idea that it's funded by outside sources, obviously, first, because I think, like I kind of share a little bit of what Quentin was saying, just the area and the number of traffic, because there's quite a few of these railroad crossings we have in town. And I was just thinking about Gentile. I'm not saying a drive over, but I see more people crossing that, and that's just the main, and they're getting into town.
Yeah, well,
There's a lot more for them to walk.
they go to
towards it.
school across the tracks and back, where here you don't.
But
Bayview Elementary is the only elementary on the north side, and it doesn't include anybody on the other side of the tracks.
keep in mind, those have sidewalks, they have pedestrian safety
Right.
improvements, they're not at this skew. This skew is really what is creating the problem. You can't, in a vehicle, really see past the berms that are here, so I understand what you're saying. There are other crossings, but we feel like those are
Yeah.
I won't say they're safe, but they're safer because they do have those safety improvements. This one really has no safety.
I think all of us who've crossed that in our car have all
Yeah,
done a double take as you go, because it feels like a crossing, like you said, for a long time, because it's just the.
And also, just south of the picture, it's a sharp curve.
Yeah.
You can't see the trains coming.
And I don't recommend anybody walk across it. But if you walked across it, that's a whole nother animal.
now, it just,
Please don't.
in the open, you've got, on the south side, you have homes on both sides of the road.
No,
You have homes on the west side and then a storage unit development on the east.
East side.
Yeah, right here, but if you go up a little farther, there's homes.
On the other side of the tracks. On the other side of the crossing.
If you're going north, there's homes on the west side, east side.
Here, you got homes, here, you got homes, but this,
that's a
when you
big.
come down here, there's homes.
That's,
What I'm saying is, people from here, if you put a bridge here, they gotta cross the road to get to it. Right? Am I missing something? I've only driven the road like 5 million times.
So we're gonna be putting the bridge on the west side on the
You're
south.
putting it on this side, I forgot.
Yeah.
Well, then you got the people over here have to cross the road to get.
We could span it over to the east side, but north of the crossing, if that is advantageous.
I'm just saying, if you have people, the idea I like, okay, I'm not, and, but the idea is that if you have people that use that crossing, kids, well, then in order for the one side to use it, they gotta cross the road somewhere. So I don't know how you do that.
I think no matter what option you
Yeah.
do, they still got.
Yeah, that's what I
whether it's a
mean.
bridge.
So do you
full-
make crosswalks?
Potentially, what you would look at is right now, this is kind of a 30% concept.
Sure.
As we go get funding for this, then we would say, okay, let's vet the rest of this out at the 80% and make those final decisions on the design.
There is another trail crossing. You can cross the road just south of this picture. Just
Yeah.
another
There's a hot
75 feet
crossing down
right.
there. That would be
Just
where I
come
would
back south.
anticipate
That'd be
trail.
quick- that'd be quicker than going into Antelope.
So, council?
Would your next?
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead, Mayor.
Go.
So, I'm all about safety and I understand this area and know that we need to do something, but this is more of a question probably for Steve or the staff. With this, going after this federal funding to accomplish this sidewalk crossing, would that impact any future federal funding that we could go after for potential, what am I trying to say, vehicle crossings, whether it be under or overpass of a, say for instance, like on Hillfield or Gordon Avenue, for our northeast westbound meters?
No, Mayor, each project should have its own kind of evaluation on its own merits and things, so I don't think there's like a limited pool of money that we can dip from if each project gets evaluated based on its own submittal. And so we could get submitted funding for this and then even possibly do the other ones that we've talked about at the same time. It's all just how much money do they have to fund things, but they use a scoring system to evaluate these projects, and a lot of it has to do with safety or other, factors that each one would be weighed by itself.
Okay, I like that idea, and the possibility, like Councilman Morris pointed out, that there could be other partners. So realistically, it wouldn't look like Layton's trying to go after all the federal funding if we do this and another crossing or anything like that, correct?
Yeah, we would anticipate anybody with an interest, we would try and help be partners in it and write letters of support and things like that.
I think one of the surrounding word to use, benefits of this project is I think at all levels, the railroad, the professional consultants, our staff, UDOT recognizes that this is a safety issue. Other crossings are a little bit safety, but a lot convenience, right? The vehicular crossings that the mayor was talking about, those are largely not safety issues as much as they are convenience and traffic flow. So, at least you correct me if I mistake this, Steve, but in the discussion with the various parties, that's why we think there's a good option for outside funding, is because universally when people take the time to look at this, there is clearly a safety issue that needs to be addressed. And so I think the state has an interest in that. We have an interest in that, obviously. And hopefully the federal government will. But I think that's why we think there's a good opportunity with not too much money on our part. But the safety issue is just going to get larger, as you referenced. It's not going to go away.
No.
The other options that we talked about earlier that we thought were reasonable and less expensive, the railroad has declined to even consider, and they have the ability. There's no ability to change that approach. So we either do nothing, knowing that there's a terrible safety risk that's going to increase, or we look at the most cost-effective, workable solution. That's where we've ended up here. And
would the railroad have an issue with an overpass?
a full overpass?
With this, would they look at it and go, no, we don't want you crossing?
We don't think so. These gentlemen work with them. We've been consulted, and part of, I think, the criteria that alternatives that have been considered have been informed by these gentlemen and the state's experience.
They don't have to pay.
With,
they're okay?
Yeah, yeah.
Not much impact on that.
And
Just go over.
I can't speak for the railroads, but yeah, generally anything that removes traffic from a crossing, be it vehicular or pedestrian, they're in favor of it. So,
It reduces risk for the railroad. It is a definite benefit to them. We're currently working on a grade separated crossing up in Brigham City right now. Their only real concern is, are you putting anything in a right of way? As soon as you start putting stuff in the right of way, that's when they start complaining. But they're all on board for things that clear span over the right of way and remove anyone that's conflicting with the rail lines.
Thank you for the brief.
I'm just going to, just the height, I guess you mentioned height in part of it.
23
Do they decide, I mean, they're not going to go any higher?
2310 is UDOT
That's
standard.
their-
UPR standard is 23.4, and it's been that way for a very long time.
That's the minimum height.
That's
That's
minimum.
at least that.
Minimum
So we've got
vertical
really,
clearance. There are other clearances horizontal as well, but that won't be a factor in this particular project.
Thank you.
thank you, sir.
We talked about emergency response time, and this pedestrian overpass obviously wouldn't mitigate that at all. If we see the inland port turn into what they talked about early in the inland port discussions, and if UTA double tracks, then we're going to see a lot more train traffic, so that response time is likely going to be added to. Are we okay with that, or is there options to find federal funding for a full overpass? Because I think it could turn into a safety issue if our auto traffic goes up and if our train traffic also increases. So I like the pedestrian overpass, but 20 years we might end up doing the full-on overpass. I mean, that number's
Well,
gonna be a
that's
lot
why I brought
higher.
up the question about Hillfield.
Yeah.
Because I think that's more in the center of our city and we service more where this is on the north end. But I personally like the pedestrian crossing on the north end and preserve the vehicle crossing in the center of our city.
I was just gonna say, realistically, the full grade separated crossing would be the best solution, but it's gonna take a lot of money to do it.
Speaking of homes and
Yeah.
this, I think that the fire folks are here, but I think there are man-made or natural impediments all across the city. You've got hills and valleys and gullies and creeks and this and that and the other. And I think our people won't brag a bit. I think do an exceptional job of pre-planning to try to make sure that they meet their response standards by pre-planning. And so if they know there's an issue, and they've been doing this for years, accommodating it, they know they don't want to get stuck behind a train there. And so it may take an extra 30 seconds, but they'll use Demetro Drive, or they'll go this or they'll go that. And the fire agencies work extremely well together. So if North Davis is coming from the north, they'll be aware of that, right? We talk about these kind of obstructions. So I'm not saying it could be improved, but I think that they fire better than probably any agencies, both agencies work together to provide for the response and make sure they don't get caught. And things will evolve. On this area there may not be, but there may be additional roads that are built or connections that are built that'll either add to that or take away from it. They'll just respond to it. But it's going to be evolving. You know that. Obviously, it's going to be an evolving thing over the next 10 or 15 or 20 years, and we'll have to evolve it.
Just like everything else. I mean, Chief, do you know when a train's going by? I mean, I know that.
We don't. I mean, there would be some ways, there's really no way we really know for sure. We see long distance, but if it's,
Well, I know.
if it's, when we're coming up there, if we see the gates come down, and if we see a UTA train, that's pretty quick.
Yeah.
It'd be quicker for us to just wait for the UTA train to pass and then go through. But if you see a freight train going, then our guys go on the metro and around and then pull them. Yeah, it's just line of sight. We don't have, there's some departments, I think Kaysville actually used to have like a camera on the tracks where they could actually see in the station, see if they had a train coming. But by the time you get there, sometimes it could be crossing, it might be coming by the time you get out to your engine and drive there's a train. So we just worked around it.
I think too, if we not to belabor it, but with the consolidated dispatch and the virtual consolidation we're doing, and the work on the paramedics that we've done or in the middle of now, eventually, hopefully all of the agency units in the county will have ADL, so automatic vehicle locators, and so your nearest engine will go. So if you have something like this, you may have, even if it's in Layton, you may have a North Davis fire responding to it from a different direction because it's a closer unit, right? And so it won't always be a station or an engine out of station 51 and down on 2200 West that's running this. It may be running, there's a station that's at Lowe's, right? They'll run over the freeway, or they may be at the hospital, and they get called, they're going to run to this, or North Davis will run from the north, or Syracuse will run from the west, So I think that technology will help to address these physical barriers that get put up, that reduce response time. And that's the benefit of that system, right? Everybody has a common, in the county is working toward a common station alerting system. So I think that'd be pretty good. You can go with that, Chief.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Identify these and pre-plan them and say, okay, this could be a problem. How are we going to work together to make sure we get a response there as quick as possible?
Mm-hmm. The other thing I'm going to say is we have not found a solution for the access issue for that full grade separated crossing that will work. We haven't laid out the S-curve, or that access might still be limited by the approaches to that overcrossing. So it may not be feasible altogether, just given the limited access.
So would you also, I mean, there was discussion about partnerships, obviously, a majority of these folks crossing are not in our city. So would you take this presentation there as well, talk to them, or we would just take the lead and expect or hope that they would be on board because it's our road, but the majority of the actual residents who are using it are not Layton residents.
We certainly could.
Yeah, we would definitely want to talk to them because part of the grant process is if you have multiple agencies saying, hey, this is an issue, we agree, then that's what we need. And so it would be great to have Clearfield and UDOT and everybody involved, UP even, writing letters saying, hey, this is needed and we need to support it. So,
Well, I think that, engineering says that this is a exceptional crossing that needs us to look at it before we do the other ones, and that's something we should certainly look at. And I think what I'm hearing is that we need to understand about our partners. Obviously, this is a 30% concept, so we're not too far along in this, so we don't want a safety issue, and especially if we have someone else pay for it, and I think that's something that we can do. So thank you for your presentation.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
my pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks for answering questions too. So next, Chief Ward is going to discuss some fireworks restrictions for the upcoming summer season.
Mayor Pro Tem Council, to be very brief, so you can move on. We are required to submit to Davis County by May 26th our restrictions map, so they can forward that on to the state in time. We are recommending that we go with our current restrictions. We cleaned the map up last year and took care of some areas that were made a little bit difficult for compliance when we were looking for the area. Again, that little orange colored area, that's the no aerials allowed, but regular ground fireworks are allowed. The pinkish one is east of 89. We've had, since 2005, we've had a ban on all fireworks of all types east of 89. And so we would just like to continue with that, and that's really about it. We have an abundance of moisture, but all that's going to do is give a proliferation of fine fuels, and it's the fuel loading at the lower elevations is going to be very significant. So we're still going to have a pretty lower elevation. We're going to have probably a very busy fire season at the 4,500 foot level and below.
That was one of my questions, was that previous years, so a lot of these firework restrictions, especially the ones in orange, have been based on the drought.
Mm-hmm. Well,
it's the same.
that's the other side now. Yeah, now we have the other side. Now we've got proliferation of all the grasses and everything. So, I guess that was it. Unless you had any other questions, I think we gave you the map, or that's the map. I think you've got that in your packet. I think you also have the dates of discharge again as a reminder. And we'll have sale sites. I think, like I said, we have about 20.
Yeah, just a little bit at 20 indoor and outdoor sales, 10 sites. We do have the 2 alternative parks still, Andy Adams, but we'll have to narrow that because they're under reconstruction up there, and as well as Sand Ridge. The map in front of you is actually an interactive map.
It's like it's a show every night.
Yeah,
in our place.
it is. Yeah. But anyway, this is the interactive map. You can probably zoom into one of the addresses here on one of the roads. So if you was to type in this address here, which I can't see from this angle, but it would zoom in and tell you he was in the restricted area for aerials. And then, so these will be at the cell sites through a QR code that's on the map. They can just scan it. They go directly to this, type in their address, or look through it like we did right here.
Yeah, so it's always interesting because I know there's one on Ford Lane, it was Fairfield, in the restricted zone, and it's selling the stuff that's restricted to the
That's
amount.
restricted.
Yeah, we can't restrict the sales of the areas, even though they're in the restricted area.
It's just.
We can only restrict the discharge.
Yeah.
It was questioned in the legislative approaches this last year, and it didn't get any traction at all.
Was there not a day at it? Or we didn't,
There was a talk on that to use a Diwali day, Diwali
Yeah,
day,
Diwali.
but it did not legislate.
It's recognized, but you can't.
Recognize that the fireworks are like the structure.
Just another FYI, we do have under ordinance prohibit sky lanterns throughout the city. So one of the reasons for that is because of our air traffic with Hill Air Force.
And typically when you go out, and I know that the police department's been helping you with enforcement. Typically when you go out though, just give them a warning the first time. It's not like a
Yeah,
Yeah.
our goal is to gain compliance. And so we see if we gain compliance, and then if we have to go back in there the second time, we warn you, and now we're gonna call in PD to give you a ticket. So,
If they are shooting illegal fireworks, we confiscate.
yeah, that's right, yeah.
And those are like the single mortar shots, Roman candles, firecrackers.
Bottle rockets, which are
Bottle
a
rockets.
huge offender.
Yeah.
The smallest,
Yeah, bottle rockets
bottle
and
rocket.
Roman candles.
So how is it? I know it's mayhem and it's busy for you guys, but does it seem to are people?
I think we've had this restriction in place long enough. I think we've had pretty good compliance. We have really good compliance east of 89.
Yeah.
We have some kids that, just mischievous, go light fireworks up on Layton Ridges, whatever. But we've had these so long, I think people are, unless they're newer into the city and
Right.
don't recognize it, but overall, we've had really good compliance, and
Good.
it's still busy.
Yeah.
We'll still have an extra staff brush engine during those times.
Sure.
They'll be stationed at Station 4 in the east side, and they'll still do the patrols and be out there.
How's the relationship with firework, or the retailers, firework retailers? Are they good, or?
We do have to permit them out and do inspections, and it seems like it's fairly welcomed. A lot of these sites are actually generated by families that want to just earn some income on the side a little bit. And so we shepherd them along, make sure they know they have all the compliances there. Our biggest thing is sometimes they want to make the sell, so they'll say, yeah, you can shoot them off anywhere in Layton, and that's not true. You got the map right in front of the register and everything, so. But for most part, there's good cooperation, and yeah. Only had one worst case scenario before.
Any concerns with this?
Nope.
Yeah. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So, Councilmember Smith Edmondson wanted to discuss Layton Communities that Care. Let's move to that as we got it.
I will
Lead out on that?
I will lead out and I will be brief because I know we have talked about a lot of this tonight. I brought this up at the last meeting. Layton Communities That Care is our program that focuses on youth alcohol and drug prevention as well as suicide prevention. And we, in the past, were thinking we were going to have to merge with some other cities in our county in this middle area, the central area. We're not doing that. We are losing our coordinator because she took another position down south. We need to provide them being DBH, with an answer of if we are willing to come up to a 30 cents per resident amount as far as resources, which will help to cover some of the cost of that position. And we are the largest city in the county, and so a majority of the services that are provided come to us and are expended upon our kids and our youth, because we have the two major high schools here. We have Northridge and Layton. South Weber is also included in our Communities That Care program, but they make up a very small portion of the services that are provided. And so what Davis Behavioral Health is asking is that we commit to a part-time or full-time commitment by July 1 of 2024, which would not have any impact on our current fiscal year and the budget that we've already agreed upon. But they want some type of commitment before they are willing to post the position, meaning our coalition, which is fully inactive at present, running. We have key leaders, we have committee members, all of that. We would not have a coordinator to help pretty much us continue moving on. And all of those other committee members that I mentioned are volunteer basis, or like myself, where, we've agreed to have a city council member sit on that board. And so it is really advantageous for the city, for us to work with DBH in this. There was an option for us to take this position on under the city, but that's not really something that we want to do. We would prefer for this type of position to stay with Davis Behavioral Health because they have other resources that can help to support the program. And so what I am asking for is a verbal agreement, commitment, that we can look for, find additional funding. We currently have a $10,000 line item on our budget to support Layton Communities That Care. We are talking about an additional $14,000 roughly. That's not a lot of money. I do know that we can probably work to find out how we can do that. We do have over a year to do that, but I'm asking for a agreement or a commitment on the part of the city to help to fund this program, because prevention is more feasible than having to deal with the problems after the fact. So that is what I'm asking for. There are some funding streams that have come available. The coordinator position, to give you a brief example of what that coordinator position does, that position is the position that writes the grants for us to get the money that we need to put on our programs. We have Big Brothers Big Sisters. We have plans to put in a Big Brothers Big Sisters site. We're hoping to put that at Bayview Elementary, hoping to start in the elementaries, moving earlier on where you'll have a better connection for our young people as they grow, because it's easier to have that connection when they're younger and they know somebody is looking out for them, somebody is kind of watching them, as opposed to trying to do that at a high school level. And so we have some measures that we're trying to put in place, and we want to affect them at a younger age. I mentioned last time that the Learning to Breathe classes that are in the 6th grade classrooms, that is something that is a partnership with the Layton CTC and the Davis School District, and that's actually expanding. There are some other schools outside of the district that are in our city that are going to be implementing that within the coming year. And so this coordinator position, we rely heavily upon them to find grant monies for us and put on things that can help us with all of the programs and strategies that we try to do to implement these programs. So the ask is not for money today, but it is to ask that we would look at ways that we can help get this funded for the fiscal year 2024-2025. And that is my request of the council.
Thank you. A discussion on that?
I think it's a small amount of money for a good return. I've been to several of the key leader meetings and some good groups working together. And this has done a lot to get that going, to get that in place. I feel like it's a good investment for the city.
Is there any concern about a per capita funding? Seems to me, I guess my first impression on that was, yes, we're the biggest, but maybe that doesn't necessarily mean that we're the biggest strain or the biggest need. And our initial funding was $10,000, which is what basically got this program going. And so I would feel more comfortable if it was just a flat number than per capita, because I still have some, and I have some, I wouldn't say concerns, it's just that it seems like we're involved in social services a little bit, And I think that if it's directed towards the kids, it seems to me it should be a school district fronting foundation program. And obviously, it's not too much money, but it's still taxpayer money, and I want to make sure that we're not duplicating what I think the school district should be kind of shouldering. So that's not to say I don't think we're gonna have good discussions. That's just where I'm at.
I think this is a perfect place to look at the CBDG funds that we have. As it's a community thing, I agree with Zach. It just seems like cities were in the business of it's sewer, it's roads, it's public safety, and I don't disagree about prevention. I don't disagree about taking care of the kids. It seems like it's a school function, and or the county with the health department, but that's where, and maybe they're getting funding from that as well. I don't know. They're going to ask everywhere, I'm sure. But if we, as far as community goes, we do get funds to help community-wide.
Right.
That might be the place to look. So that's going to take from somebody else. But again, the somebody else is maybe that's down the line of something's already happened versus preventing, and we just got to balance it. So the per capita thing is concerning too, but I just don't. Layton City taxpayers, and the school district, I think, is the right place to find the funds. But that's my opinion.
I think I'm not looking at things on how they work as much as I'm looking at 14,000 that goes towards our kids, because we are the biggest, and you know, I mean, we're not a perfect community where all our kids are great. And I mean, I'm a living example.
But look what you've turned out to be.
Yeah.
A pillar of society.
Yeah.
Is Jody from the Davis School Foundation on the
No,
C2?
no. We do have principals, we have representation from a number of principals. We have one of the Connection Center coordinators. So we do have representation from the school district. We have school board representation, and a lot of businesses. It's basically a community. So CTC is Communities That Care. So it's a community coalition, and that is the whole idea, is that you involve anybody who is connected to the city, who is connected to the kids who grow up in that area. And that if you have enough touch points, you have enough adults who are caring, who are in their lives, who can provide resources, who can speak like those types of things, that you work together. So there are parents on the boards, there are parents on the committees. Sure. There are a number of, I think there's 12 different sectors where the coalitions have folks that they need to be a part of the coalition. And to speak to your point, Zach, Layton CTC is Layton and South Weaver. That's it. So we are the biggest, and we do have the biggest need, because South Weaver itself is not very great. There's not, but their kids, according to district lines, their kids go to Northridge. So they end up being in our cone, so to speak, from the school district level.
And you feel like, I mean, the return on investment from the taxpayers has been worth it?
I feel like
and I really just say that not as not leading you at all. It's just, I want to make sure that if the programs look good, feel good, and there's one person that shows up or something like that.
Yeah.
And I know it's just starting. I just want to make sure that, you know, we're getting in that investment. So maybe the one question I did have, and we can talk about this later, but can we get an idea of what their other funding sources are and to what extent?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have all of that. I don't have it right here in front of me, but I have that whole thing. And just to clarify, the portion of the money that they're asking for actually goes to support benefits. DDH pays for the entire salary of the coordinator.
Right.
But what they want, and this is CTC statewide, they want the cities that are participating, the cities that are being involved, to have a stake in what they're doing. We have historically been the city who has put this in our line item budget already. And there are other cities that they're, saying we want to do this, but we're not sure we can do this or we can do that. And moving forward, they just want to have MOUs in place across the board and have a system or a process because they didn't have that before. And so this is their way of kind of clean slating it and just saying, okay, we want to make sure that everybody is on the same page, and every city where there's a CTC, every group where there's a CTC, this is what you're going to be doing. And because Elisa is vacating her position, they're able to start that here now. These other CTCs that are just getting started, they're also starting. There is a North Davis CTC where they have a coordinator there already. They're working fine, and they will be working up to this, but because that coordinator is there, they're not going to pull them from underneath the rug. And they are flexible as far as what we can do or willing to do. I just don't want them to put out an FTE for a part-time position when we're growing and going to continue to grow, because I've already told Elisa she has to be on the board. So I don't want us to go backwards because of this. So I have no problem with addressing the flat rate versus the per capita. Because we are going to have our own still, that makes it an easier discussion. When we were potentially merging with these other 3 cities, then things were hairy. So I can speak with her about what that rate can look like. It's just a matter of, can we agree that we want to fund this at some level and have them post this position? Because at the end of May, Elisa will be gone. And we don't want all of our work to fall flat.
So I think that the 3 of you are comfortable with that, right? So that's, yeah. And I don't think Councilman Morris and I are against it. It's just more information. They don't need it till the next budget anyway. So
The only other thing I would like to see is what entails in the position.
I have that as well.
Okay, because I just don't want to say, yeah.
Yep.
I
I asked for that.
Yeah, I'd like to see what's expected of them, so you can, I don't want to say hold their feet to the fire, but if this is what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, and I'm not against going to a flat rate rather than a per capita, that's fine, but I'm just in support of the position.
Oh, I definitely would think flat rate better than.
Well, yeah, of course.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for the
Councilmember,
discussion.
for bringing that discussion up. Councilmember Morris, you have a visitor, one of our
Yes.
commission chairs, who also happens to be my neighbor. Great guy. You want to introduce him, talk about some of the stuff you guys been working on?
Henry Cross here. He's the chair of the ramp commission, and he was an alternate commissioner for a little bit.
Was.
And then, but just in name only, he was working as a full-time commissioner all of last year. And then when the mayor, she filled all of the other positions, he was elected the chair. So he comes with a lot of experience. He does this stuff professionally as well, and which has helped him. He had to tweak a few things.
Yeah.
It's not the federal government per se, but he is thorough. He looks at every angle, and the recommendations that he has tonight are they've vetted all of these. So I have full confidence in what he's going to present, and grateful for his service. We'll turn the time over to Cameron.
Thanks. So I really want to thank the city council. We feel very supported as this commission, and that's a big deal. So we're volunteers and we get that, but not only from the council, but then the recreation department. We have Dave in there and Michelle and a whole staff of people who after hours come in and support that. And we get to sit around and make a lot of decisions, but then all of our notes and all of the findings that we have and the discussions that we need to continue on keep going through the rec department. So they definitely need to be mentioned in this, and how much of this is, it's not just the commission, it's a huge collaborative effort. So thank you, thanks for supporting us, and we're happy to deliberate on these. For our findings, our recommendations, I will just say, in general, you should have been able to review it, and definitely open to questions, but the spirit of how we review these is we have bylaws and we have requirements, and we look at every single application to them. And so before we can even say whether or not it should be racked and stacked at a certain point, we determine if it's eligible. And when it's not, we clearly state why, and are often going back to those groups or whoever it is asking for the funding and helping them clarify and helping them for future applications. But then as we do that, we really take, and having Dave in our meetings is key, because the Parks and Recreation Department, parks have a lot of requests for grants, and we vet those, and so understanding their priority has gone into a lot, especially this year. This is the first year that the Ramp Commission's received applications for more money than we actually have to give out, which is, to me, that's an awesome thing, because it's still a ton of money, but we're having a lot more people aware of this. And so as we went through it, right off the bat, we asked the Parks Department, what's your priority, and really help us understand what you would decrease in funding so that we can fund some of these different tiers. And that's kind of something we kept going throughout, and then at the end we did end up shorting some of the funds on their lowest priority, and it allowed to fund all the ones that we felt were appropriate. So with that, are there any questions on the recommendations?
Do we have a chance, can we put them on the screen?
Yeah.
Can we have them? Because I know they're in our.
Yeah, we sent these out, but it would be a good refresher.
Just so we can look at them here.
Maybe while I'm doing this, Michelle, she may be able to help me as well, but we wanted to share with you this evening that Michelle has, after 22 years, decided to take a different position.
Yeah, 22 years with the city.
Wow. Oh, with the city.
Yeah. I've accepted the department director position in Royce. We can't find a director.
No. Director Howard. Wow. That's awesome.
Congratulations.
Were you gonna find it?
You get to talk about them, about their pool.
Yes.
You want to pull one up?
Yep.
Cool.
I think theirs is older than ours.
Yeah, just as much of a problem.
Yes, it is. So,
And if we go into the complex where I used to play basketball my entire young life, and get some new basketballs. Yeah. So they were always like wobbly, and they had,
So you got some good.
yeah, no, you dribble it and it go off the side.
Just so you know, you have.
Yeah, that's right. Congratulations.
thank you.
That's awesome.
Yeah, thanks for all your support.
Yeah, that's
I'm
awesome.
gonna miss you guys.
22 years with the city.
You're gonna be missed for sure.
You can still come visit. I will, for sure.
For July 4th.
That document is on our shared Parks and Recreation that we can't access from here. So I'd be glad to go through those with you if I could read through them, but that would be
And
helpful.
I have it pulled up as well.
Is there anybody?
Budget, I think.
What's that?
I think all of these are in the budget as well.
Yeah.
Any discussion or questions for
No, we went through that
Russ?
kind of before.
I appreciate just your ability to, like, we say this all the time, with people who are willing to take of their time, that you got kids, you got job, you got family life, you got other things you could be doing. So I just appreciate you spending time and sharing that volunteerism with the city, because this is how this is supposed to work. Like, we can't do it full-time. The staff are amazing full-time, but we're not full-time. So between us and the volunteers, that's how we get a lot of the work done to help support the staff, so.
And he went to Northridge. I mean, he's a Layton kid.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm the only one in here.
So just a quick question. The last couple of years, there have been, between the time of the recommendation for the budget and this meeting, 2 years ago, there was a change. Last year, there was someone came in late. Anything like that happen between recommendations to now?
No, I
Anything
think,
you wanna,
let me see on the, I think there were just a couple of recommendations. I don't think there was anybody that ended up coming in late, was there?
Yeah, there was no changes after the document that we sent you that had those recommendations on it.
But I will say there were a couple in there, and we made our comments as to why, and I guess this year we didn't really want to change anything, but for example, there was a newer group that basically hasn't had any funding coming in, and so their operating budget's so low that they asked for just a little over $1,000, and we had to cut it down. I think it ended up being like 896. I mean, we got it down to the exact amount that we could allow and recommend. But we would, I guess, if it was a lot more of a disparity and we felt like that was a need, that would be something we'd come and say, even though we can't recommend that, to look into that and maybe give someone new an opportunity to do something like that, because then it also increases their operating budget because they're getting a grant, and then the next year they can do something great. And this is an adults symphony band or something, and cool opportunity and something where they're gonna have tons of families come in and enjoy a different opportunity. So we appreciate that there's a lot of that communication back and forth. We feel like we say it almost in every meeting. This is something we're gonna put in a note to the council and let them know how we really feel, but we're gonna follow our rules. And I would say to that, we don't feel like there's a need to change the rules either. We're constantly tweaking the forms and even how we evaluate and what those numbers that we score things really mean. But as far as the actual rules that we follow, we feel like they're great and they give us an opportunity to fairly grade them.
Thank you, Cameron.
Yeah.
Just so you know, the actual rules that were made were perfect.
Now I want them changed.
Well, thank you. Appreciate you spending time with us and for all the work you did on this. So we could, I mean, this is a Layton specific fund. And
yeah, it's great.
The money is taxed here and it stays here, and you help us get the projects for the citizens. Yeah. So it's awesome.
Should recognize the former ramp chair.
Yeah, the former ramp chair.
He's lost now.
Doesn't know what to do with all this water.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you, Cameron. All right, I think we'll have time for Dave Price. Discuss the continuing discussion on the pool conditions assessment, specifically with the small pool.
We just have 5 minutes. I don't know.
I don't think it'll make it.
Do you want to?
Unless we really address the one issue.
I think, I mean, I can be speaking for some people, but I think we all pretty much agree with the small pool.
So, yeah, don't go to slides. Let's just talk about the one pressing issue, and then we'll have to come back at another time and address the balance of it.
And so I think you realize the big issue is simply the small pool. Staff recommendation was that we close it because of the safety hazards and the costs. And we didn't want to do that without your consent. And so that's why we're here tonight, basically.
Can you speak to the timing, David, if we delay, teams need to understand whether it's going to be available or not, so that's part of the pressing nature of the issue as well.
Yeah, the two big users are our citizens. They're the largest, and then the surfers is the second largest group. And they are currently in the facility. They have not been brought into this conversation, but we would quickly make them aware of what's happening and why. And they, like all of our user groups, will have to have a reduction in the amount of time they have in our pools. They will still have a place at the wave pool, but it will be much smaller than what they have right now. And so we don't take this step lightly. This is a hard thing. And and we've looked for different options, but this seems to be the sensible and the right thing to do for our citizens.
And when would you be doing that? Would that be an immediate
Immediate closure, right?
closure immediately?
Yes, I think that's, again, the proper thing to do. If we wanted to give them a small window of time to be able to make other arrangements, we could do that, 2 weeks. Allows them to continue swimming for a week or two, and then we could have them understand what time we do have available in the wave pool. But we need to do this quickly.
There's no, I mean, how long does it take to get the little pool up? Or is it already?
It's ready right now. They're actually using it right now. Okay.
Yeah, I'm saying sooner rather than later so they don't get into a habit.
Yeah.
Is everyone agreeing with that?
School's out next Friday.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're ready to open on Monday, I believe, for the large pool.
Thanks, Dave. That is sad news. I mean, it's nothing you're all excited about, but
Well, it's only
it's for safety.
60-something, how old is it?
67.
67 years old.
Thanks for commissioning that study too and helping us make a decision.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I think we want to get into our meeting, so,
Can I make a proposition to you?
yes.
No,
This is one that you'll take. It's the best deal ever.
that's what all
I'm gonna
lawyers
send you,
say.
I'm gonna send you out a portal that the state auditor has, some of you may have done it already, I'm not sure if you have. But there's an auditor's portal, and in there is municipal training, and you can actually pull a certificate at the end of the training.
Oh,
And it has open meetings, it has conflicts of interest, but it has several other things. And once you get that certificate, you essentially qualify for state statute regarding open meetings is covered. And so it's a lot better than listening to.
Well, sorry, Gary.
No, it truly
Ran out of
is.
time today.
If you'll commit to do that, I promise not to talk to you about this ever again. No,
This year.
not ever again.
Until next year.
Ever again this
Until
year.
next year. I'll send it out to you, I'll send a link out to
Okay,
you.
send
It
the
takes
link
about
out.
25 minutes to look at the
Okay.
whole thing and get your certificate. Bring your certificate back next meeting, and I'll check it off, and you want me to do everything.
wow.
Does that sound all right?
Yeah, that
Okay.
would be
Can I
good.
get a motion to end our work meeting?
Motion to end the work.
We're
And a second?
gonna do the closed meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Quick question, I just say, Zach, thank you very much for
Oh,
coming for me.
you bet.
Oh.
You'll thank me Our Layton City Council meeting for May 18th, 2023. I'm going to invite our ramp commissioner, Cameron Cross. He's going to give us an invocation to our services today, and then I'll follow it up with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Our dear Father in heaven, we're so very grateful for this opportunity that we have to meet as a city and to have our council members here and all the representatives and city officers that represent us and take our well-being in mind. We ask that please bless them this meeting to have clear minds and to be able to make good decisions and be able to continue to watch out for the citizens of Layton. We ask that it please bless their families and those they're in charge of, that they will be blessed with thy spirit, be watched over and protected, and help them to be able to fulfill their duties. We're grateful for all the moisture that we've received in this last winter, and we ask that it please help us to be able to mitigate the water that we're receiving down from the mountains. We ask that it please help us to be good stewards of all of the responsibilities that are given to us. And we say these things in the name of our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Cameron. And Cameron is actually a veteran as well. He's going to be for 6 months in Saudi Arabia. So he's just a man of many talents. And we have Tom here, and we have a bunch of veterans here. So we always just thank you for your service. So if you want to repeat the pledge with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And for information, Mayor Petro is on the phone, and she's going to be involved in our deliberations today. Council, we have a set of minutes from our March 22nd budget work meeting that need to be approved. I will entertain a motion for that.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes from our City Council budget work meeting, March 22nd, 2023.
Second. Councilmember Roberts has moved to approve the minutes, and the second from Councilmember Morris. We'll take this as a voice vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The minutes are approved, 5-0. We don't have any municipal events or verbal petitions, so at this point of our meeting, we will open it up to citizen comments. We have two. Oh, go ahead.
We might have some announcements.
Oh, we do? Okay. Councilmember Roberts has some announcements.
Real quick, family recreation coming up tomorrow night here at the Ed Kenley Plaza, 5:30 to 7:30. It'll be a game night put on by our Parks and Recreation Department. Lots of games, laser tag in the park, a Mario Kart competition on the big screen. So bring the family out and have a good time. Thank you, free of charge.
Thank you.
And I do have a couple of announcements. Just a reminder that May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and that is depression is high in not just the nation but all over. And so just check on your neighbors, check on your friends, your family members, make sure that they're okay, because sometimes people don't want to speak up. But it is important. And secondly, the Davis Arts Council summer concert series are open, and 4 of those shows have sold out already. If you are interested in purchasing tickets, please go to their website to purchase tickets, not any other sites that might be reselling them. So just wanted you to be aware of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. We're now to our citizen comments portion of our meeting. There are 2 microphones. If anyone from our community would like to speak on an issue that's not on our public hearings, you're welcome to do so at one of the podiums. And as you come up, please state your name and your address for our recorder.
My name is Joni Denhalter. My address is 233 Cold Creek Way. My issue is something that my husband Daniel Denhalter has addressed multiple times to the council. It might have been the previous city council. As you might know, Cold Creek is a very busy road. It's a through street that gets from Gentile to Hillfield. And last Thursday, my 6-year-old was almost hit. She came within inches of a car. I live on the corner of the four-way stop that's located on that street. And I was on my side of the street with my home. She was on the other side. She had gone to check on to see if a friend could play. My children know, look both ways, do not cross if there's any cars, and they're very well aware of the speeding issue that we have on that road, and also that people run that stop sign on a constant basis. They kind of look at it more as a guideline than a law. She was crossing, there were 2 cars stopped, one facing south, one facing north. The one facing north waved her through. The one facing south was not paying attention. I was watching both. She ran across because she wants to get out of the road. The one that was heading southbound took off without seeing her. And she came within inches. I was yelling at him to stop, 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 stop. He was looking at me, wasn't looking at her. Finally, he saw this little blonde out of the corner of his eye, slammed on his brakes. Had he not done so, she would have gone under his car. I bring this to you today, and I'm sorry. This is an ongoing issue, and this is my biggest fear, that what is it going to take for proactive measures instead of reactive measures to do something about the speeding. Number one, the speeding. It's a 25-mile-per-hour road. It's a neighborhood. People go 40. And secondly, they treat that four-way stop as if it's not a law. They run that stop sign on a daily basis. And just this morning, I watched a Suburban just plow right through that stop sign. What is it going to take to have change happen? Is it going to take a little kid dying, getting run over, for something to happen? My husband has come multiple times asking, pleading for change on that road. Lit up stop signs. My suggestion is to have one of those mile-per-hour signs that blinks. That says slow down, because I don't think people pay attention when they're driving down this road. They forget the 25 mile per hour because it is a wider road than normal. And people find this more convenient than taking 3000 or up by Sugar Street. It's a faster route for them, but they don't live in that neighborhood. I've yelled at multiple people. I've had people slam on their brakes and come back, and I've been confrontational with them. But then I've asked for their address so I can come speed down their neighborhood while their children are out playing, because that's how it feels. So I'm asking the council to please figure out if there's something that can be done. I'm not asking for a miracle, but I'm asking that somehow people that do not live in this neighborhood will become aware that people do live in this neighborhood. People have little children, and that we don't want a tragedy to happen before change will happen. We're asking for something proactively to be done instead of reactively after something has been tragically done. Again, my suggestion, I would love to see a stop or a speed limit sign that blinks. I've seen them on Gordon Avenue, and they work because it's caught my attention to watch my speed if I'm going faster than I should be. I know they've talked about speed bumps, but we understand with the snowplows. We've talked about a roundabout. We've talked about something to get people to slow down, because they will literally turn off of Gentile and go 40 completely all the way through until they hit Hillfield. We have children walking to and from school to Ellison Park Elementary and to North Davis Prep. It's a busy road with lots of children on it, and people just do not seem to care. Because again, until something tragically happens, people don't think, and they just kind of zone out. So I appreciate your time. That's my concern. Those are my comments. Hopefully something can be done. Hopefully we can work together to help, because I know it won't change. That's going to be a through street, and it may even get worse as the feeder streets widen on the other side of Gentile. But I think the problem will only get worse unless we can nip it in the bud now by having something done to protect our children, to protect the citizens of Layton, to think of our safety first over convenience. That's what I'm asking. So I thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Denhalter. You don't have to apologize for wanting to protect your kid. I live not too far from there, and Cold Creek is a fast street. Alex, I know that in the past, we've sent out, because Mr. Denhalter's come in here a few times, and we've communicated with him, and we've sent out the radar truck, and can we just maybe discuss with engineering if there are any additional proactive measures that we can take? I mean, again, we don't want to have something happen where, we know the Denhalters because they've come in here a lot, and we love all the kids in our city. We don't want any of them to get hit. But we are sometimes limited with what we can do. But if there are things that we can do, then I think it would be good for us to maybe open a communication line with them and see if there's some things engineering-wise and maybe with the PD, the things that we might be able to do.
Yeah, we'd be happy to do that. I made some notes. We looked at the issue very carefully before, did speed surveys down there, but it's clear it's an ongoing issue. And in fact, it's just an ongoing issue all across the community. Generally, the people that are causing the issue live in the neighborhoods because familiarity breeds contempt, basically, for all of us. We're used to the surroundings. There's no hesitation generally if we know the area very well, and so we have a natural inclination to speed. But that does, as Mrs. Denhalter said, that is a cut-through area, or can be a cut-through area for certain people, and it was constructed intentionally to be a little wider road and to carry more traffic than a typical residential street. So yeah, definitely we'll go back and revisit those issues and see if there's any additional solutions or additional enforcement that can take place.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for coming, Mrs. Denhalter. Anybody else would like to speak? Sir? Again, state your name and your address for our recorder, please.
I'm Dennis Anderson, 383 Cold Creek Way. I've lived there for about 16 years, and this incident with the Denhalter's little girl just, brought me here because most people know Lanny, my brother-in-law. I mean, not most people, but in our area they do. He's 71 years old. He's the friendliest guy you'll ever want to meet, but he's like a child. He'll just walk across the street, just thinks that nobody's going to, run into him. He doesn't even worry about it. He's just focused on, going across the street to see a friend or something. Also, my wife and I are kind of like the neighborhood grandparents. We have neighbor kids, their kids from the school want to run over to our house after school, and they won't look a lot of times, and we'll yell, don't come over. And it's just gotten worse over the years, and now with the semi-traffic coming through, the construction, I don't know what's bringing a lot of those bigger trucks, but it's the regular traffic, people just cutting through. When the schools are dropping off or picking up, impatient people come whipping around them, and the parents sometimes are some of those drivers, but it's just gotten worse and worse, and I do feel like something has to be done. I'd like to ask that they can put handicap warning signs for a handicapped person in the neighborhood like they do for blind people or something like that would wake people up that, hey, there's something I should watch out for. I think instead of having yield signs throughout the neighborhood, if they came to, having to come to a stop, it's not going to be as convenient for them to take that shortcut. But it's gotten worse, and I've seen so many times where it was pretty close calls. And, when they're little, I drove by right not long after it happened, and they were so shook up. I feel like a grandparent to their kids. And it just, I don't want something to happen to the kids or, to anybody. And I've yelled at a few of the people myself too. So, if there's something we can do, I'd like to see it. I think her idea with the sign that wakes you up like, oh, I'm going faster than I thought. Something like that. I mean, I'd like to put speed bumps there, but I guess that's been turned down. But yeah, if we can do something, that's what I'd like to.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Appreciate you sharing your thoughts with us. Speed, just anecdotally, speed is a difficult thing in our whole city. Like alluded to by our city manager, There's just I don't know if it's cultural, I don't know what's going on, but people just drive like maniacs nowadays. Our police just report a lot of incidents with high speeds, and I don't know what it is, so we'll do our best to see what we can do to remedy that situation. Anybody else in terms of citizen comments? Tom, state your name and your address. We know who you are, but...
Tommy Joe Tudor, 1757 Gregory Star. Okay. Always for Layton. This was a good time. You notice I didn't come the last 2 months. We were all pegged down with ice and snow and everything else. But I'm going to start giving again and again. Especially I heard you say about, the way for you folks out there, I was a policeman and detective for Layton City for 25 years, okay? Some of you were knowing who's who. And I just wanted to come up here for my 2 minutes. And it's really a paying time because today I went to Salt Lake City to see what they're doing because I've been a police officer and detective to find out what's everybody going to do about killing and murdering the people of Layton City. I'm a high activist, and if I see anything going, I'm going to run right in there with my guns. And I was in the Air Force, so I had a .45 and an M16 and other stuff, okay? And Layton City, I had a shotgun and a .357 Magnum. And that just tells you one little thing here. I live out on Gregory Street, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, there was a Layton or 3 daughters out there in Bayview that called my house and says, we've got a burglar in the back of our house in the kitchen, a burglar. I says, get out of the house, go to the next door and stay there. I'll be there in 1 second because I live on Gregory Drive and down I go. The only thing I had to do is put on my clothes and shoes and my gun belt and get me one of them burglars. And I did. Got it, and about a week later, the lady there, I know all of them out there in Bayview, incidentally, when those houses were built. So anyway, I can help people, been doing it for 40 years, helping anybody. I don't run from fear. I go up there and activate it. Because I had psychology and sociology at my degrees at Weber State University. Hurrah!
We're grateful for your service to the city, Tom.
Thank
Appreciate
you very much. So I thought that was good to get the councilmen and women in there on projects. Because when I worked for the city, we went out and took traffic tickets. Not the kind you pay the money, but it was pulling over as a good guy like me. And I didn't have to give them speeding tickets, which I know about 39,000 people in this city that I gave warnings to if they deserved it. But anyway, a lot of psychology on people. And that's why I go to Salt Lake City and see what they're doing. Comes up here, and I always like to be, as you can see with my 25 years in the United States Air Force, with the MPs and AFC and everybody else. So
thanks, Tom.
I've got a lot of background. If everybody has a question, or you want to talk to me at the grocery store, I'm always doing that every week. They're just afraid to come. Oh my word, I don't want to talk to that cop. I know him. He talked to me 25 years ago. So thank you very much
Thanks, Tom.
for listening, and get on to those important things for the people.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
You're an important part of our city too, Tom. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Hey, ma'am, just make sure you state your name and your address for the recorder.
Jennifer Garner, 217 Aircraft, and I would like it to be Gregory someday. Let me know when houses open up over there. So I was watching the last legislative session and saw that SB 250 kind of caught some language that wasn't allowed it, or that didn't pass in another bill, so it was added to 250 that talked about surveillance. And I've seen a few, like our lamp posts and things, go up with antennas. And so I was just wondering if you're going to notify the public of where those surveillance areas are going to be, and what the future plan of surveillance is going to be in Layton.
I'm not I mean, I can ask our city manager. I'm not aware of anything related to the SB 250 or the language of it, but.
Yeah, I'm not either. I'm not aware of that being a city. I don't know what, do you have any specific addresses?
It doesn't say, it doesn't have the address, it's just a state.
Where you have seen these.
Fort Wayne, all along I-15. There's new cameras being installed on some of those posts. And maybe it's a UDOT issue and not an I-15 issue, or not a Layton issue.
Potentially, most likely it's UDOT, but we can maybe get your contact information and just contact you when we double check. Our city attorney mentioned it. He believed it was a UDOT issue.
Yeah, there was, the cameras that you're seeing, most of them are UDOT cameras, and they put them at intersections, they put them along at major intersections, that type of thing, and along the freeway, they're installing cameras along the freeway so they can monitor what's going on there. But to my knowledge, Layton doesn't have any surveillance cameras, that we put up on behalf of our police department or on behalf of the city, except perhaps in areas in our parks, where we've experienced vandalism. We may end up in doing a little of that because we've had, there's a TikTok thing going on right now that is killing us with the amount of money that we're putting out for those types of things. But just surveillance, we don't do.
Okay. Well, I know that it's for when a child is kidnapped, someone has a warrant that's open, or car theft. But I don't know, there's this old guy, I think it was Benjamin Franklin, that said every time you give, nope, it wasn't him. Every time we gave up a little bit of liberty, or we don't deserve liberty if we keep giving it up for a little bit of security. So, and maybe we need one at Cold Creek or wherever, so that they can take license plates of who doesn't stop. But anyway, I was just curious if, I just was at the state convention and saw that our governor said, oh, there's no such thing as 15-minute cities, but then he spoke about it in 2019 at a summit. And then I was at the Clearfield City Library prior to the county convention, and their city council member, Ted Roper, said that Clearfield was a 15-minute walking city. And so I just wondered if that was coming our direction or not.
So I just looked up 250, and it is a bill specifically directed at license plate reading. And it allows the Department of Transportation to issue permits for the use of license plate reading technology on state highways, and law enforcement agencies to participate in license plate reading.
Right. It's collected by a third party, but it doesn't name who that third party is.
Yeah.
So that was just a little concerning to me, but.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Definitely want to make sure that the public would know if there was any, massive surveillance going on in the city. So thank you. Anybody else with comments, ma'am?
My name is Mary Uri, 2855 East Gentile Street. I just wanted to address the two individuals and the little girl that almost got hit. I lost my little sister 2 blocks from home in a car accident, decades ago. But the same thing, it was the yield sign that the driver didn't acknowledge and hit us. But I pick up my grandchildren often and in Salt Lake, and so I don't know if the rules are different, but there is a particular street that I go down, and there is a sign that flashes what speed I'm going, but there is also a camera, and it's flashed a couple of times. I'm going to tell you, that's all I needed. Okay, so anyway, and I know those things cost money, but having been in a situation like that, I wish we had more of those.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate you. Anybody else? Okay, I'll close our citizen comments portion and move on to the consent items that we have. Our first item is Resolution 2330, a victim service request for authorization for a block grant, and our City Attorney Gary Crane is going to address that issue.
Thanks, Mayor Pro Tem, Mayor and members of the council. This is a request that we have made to the county. The county grant administrator actually indicated the availability of this grant to the city for victim services. We've had victim services in the city for almost 30 years. It began shortly after I took a position with the city, and it's been indispensable in dealing with victims. A couple of years ago, it was 3 years ago, the VOCA grant system actually was drained by legislators who saw the Pfizer settlement coming in, and the VOCA grants are funded by the money that comes from criminal penalties and the surcharges that come on criminal penalties. And all of a sudden there's these millions of dollars coming in off of criminal penalties. So somebody at the federal level drained the VOCA grant program. And so last year, we've experienced over 2 years, 25% cut. A year ago, Senator Romney actually put into place a VOCA fix, but it's taking a long time to build that fund up again. And this year, we're about to experience a 40% cut. And so they've indicated that they would not try very, very hard not to cut personnel. But I can tell you on a daily basis, we've got numerous victims that come into our office. And sometime I'd like for you to just to sit with our victims advocate and see how much she does handle. Karen handled before her, and our new victims advocate, Isabel, handles. We've hired a temporary, Olivia, who has been outstanding, and we would like to be able to replace her. She's leaving us in June. And we would also like to fund Kelly Rushton, who is a police officer, retired police officer, is also an advocate, and he runs the housing support program so that when they're not able to get into Safe Harbor on a temporary basis, that he can provide income from that program. But they're cutting that. That's a $40,000 program, and they're cutting that, may cut that as well. We won't know until June. But all of a sudden, this grant came available, and the county grant administrator said, this is an excellent grant for what you're doing. You're doing exactly what this grant, would envision, and that is providing a social service to those who are, typically these folks are low-income folks that come in, especially women who have left their homes with their children. There is no income in those families. And so we're going to go ahead and, with your permission, apply for this grant. Resolution 2330 actually is giving us permission to go ahead and apply for that grant. We're going to apply for both pieces, the piece for our temporary person as well as the piece for the housing program. It does have a match of 25%. We are already meeting that in what the city provides. Interestingly enough, when COVID began, they stopped requiring a match for the VOCA grant. So we are still providing that money, and so we can now use that match for this grant. So it really isn't going to cost the city any additional dollars if we get the grant. We're already paying that amount, but we would ask for your support in Resolution 2330.
Thank you, Gary. Council, any discussion? I'd entertain a motion to approve.
I make a motion that we approve Resolution 2330.
I second.
Councilmember Thomas has motioned to approve Resolution 2330. Councilmember Smith Edmondson has seconded it. I'll take a voice vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The vote is unanimous. Now move on to our public hearing items. The first being a ordinance 2309, a rezone of 2855 East Gentile, and Chad Wilkinson will be presenting that to the council.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, Council. This first item, as was mentioned, is a zone change request. This is an application that's been submitted by J Development. The location of the property is 2855 East Gentile. You can see that marked with that red dot on the map. The existing zone for that property is R110. The request is to go to an R16 zone. A little bit more detail on the property. You can see this property located adjacent to Highway 89 on the east, Gentile Street there on the bottom or south of the property. It's bounded by the the property that's currently being used as a staging yard for UDOT's Highway 89 property, but bigger for the city, that is the future Gordon and Highway 89 Town Center. So this is an area that was looked at very closely during the general plan process. To that end, again, this is just an aerial photo. You can see an existing home there on the property. Some of the improvements that have been done on the UDOT property as part of the Highway 89 project, and of course all the other surrounding uses there. Again, to that end, this was an area that was looked very closely at during the general plan process. This is the kind of the town center designation in our general plan. This is just a small excerpt of our general plan map. This red dot just, again, designates this as a town center in our general plan. You can see that the town center area is an area that's shown there in that kind of pink color. And then surrounding that town center area, there are some transitional zones. This property is outlined in red. That's part of that transitional zone or transitional area that has a designation of community residential in our general plan. Community residential allows for the R16 densities that are being proposed by the applicant. The area within that town center, that pink kind of color, and it does include some of those little more yellow, kind of yellowish greenish areas, is an area that's currently under study. We have a land use study that's being paid for by a grant that was given to us by the Wasatch Front Regional Council in cooperation with UDOT. The exact zoning of those areas will be something that will come through the recommendations of that study. However, this area, again, is outside of that area. It was anticipated that it would be this transitional zoning. It's appropriate for R16 zoning in the general plan. The Planning Commission did look at this request to go from R110 to R16 and did unanimously recommend that the council approve that request based on compliance and conformance with the general plan. With that, we are also forwarding our recommendation of approval, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chad. Appreciate that information. Council, any questions or comments for Mr. Wilkinson?
I have one question, Chad. I know that it's not required to know what they plan to do here, but do you have an idea of what their potential site plan looks like?
We've seen some conceptual plans. Yeah, it's too early in the game for us to require any kind of subdivision approval plan, but it is a single-family residential subdivision. Would be accessed from Gentile Street by the extension of another street. There'd have to be its own street extended into the property to subdivide it. So that's the intention.
Chad, I tried to look up the Planning Commission minutes, but they weren't available before our meeting, so I was curious if you could give me a kind of a rundown of some of the public comments that were made at the Planning Commission.
Sure. We did have a number of the neighboring property owners there in this area. There was concerns that were expressed by the property owners. A lot of those had to do with, again, some of the things we hear quite common, which are traffic, higher densities in the area, potentially impacts on property values. Those types of concerns were expressed. Just the development pattern in the area. Those are things that we, again, acknowledged in the Planning Commission meeting and provided answers to. In terms of traffic, this is a street that's been designed to handle these types of densities. I will say one thing that's a little bit I think, well, it's important for us to say is that these are not considered to be high density. This is still a low density residential zone, single family residential zone. So certainly while it's a higher density than what is currently zoned for, it's not a high density zone. This would be a single family residential zoning district. I've tried to hit that. I probably missed some things, but that's the gist of what was said.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this matter before I open the public hearing? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
I move that we open a public hearing.
Councilmember Smith Edmondson has moved that we open the public hearing, and it's seconded by Councilman Thomas. All those in favor? Aye. Public hearing is now open. If you'd like to share your thoughts on this ordinance 2309, you're free to do so at one of the lecterns. And again, I'm sorry, you're going to have to do this. You're going to have to say your name and your address.
So my name is Joni Dunhalter, 233 Cold Creek Way. My parents actually live up in Snow Canyon, which is that subdivision right above. They have actually voiced concerns. Do we know what type of businesses are going to go in? I pass that almost every day to drop my kids off, and so I can see it actually becoming very crowded, very busy. Right now, it kind of feeds into one lane, going both east and west on Gordon. So I think it's just more, they've expressed concern as well of just because their home values, they were worried about their home values where they're right by that new Layton fire station. And I guess it's just what is it gonna look like, and how many of those single family homes are really gonna go in around it to kind of get rid of the fields that have been there for a very, very long time. So those are just my questions, maybe that he can address later.
Thank you. Do you want to address that, Chad?
I can address it now, or I can wait till all.
We'll wait. We'll wait till the end, and then he'll address all of them together. Anybody else would like to speak on this issue? Same song and dance. Sorry, you have to say your name and address.
I'm all over it. So Mary Yuri, 2855 East Gentiles. So I haven't met the developers before, but I understand they're here. So that's our property. We've lived there for 20 years. I was hoping my neighbors would show up just so I could thank them for making what was a really difficult and bittersweet decision a lot easier. But there are two buildings on this property, and one we call the cabin. It was built by Mr. Coonrat. This was all family property, and so it was built by him. It wasn't up to zoning when we purchased it. In fact, the bank wouldn't even lend on it. They only lent on the value of the property. We built what we affectionately call the garage mahal next to it, and that's what everybody thinks is the house. It's not. It's a 4-car garage with a 2-bedroom apartment above it, and it was zoned so that we couldn't rent it. We couldn't even call it a kitchen or anything upstairs. And it was going to be attached to a house that may not have been there after UDOT got done with us. But you can see it right there. Yeah, so it's we have what we call the cabin. That's the log home. And then we have the garage mahal that sits next to it. It's a very difficult thing to sell. Very difficult thing to sell. The value is really in the property. And my neighbors, which again, I wish they were here, we had one that was going to buy the property and develop it, but he thought that this was one big house, and it's not. And it's really hard, even in the property taxes, or if you look at Zillow, it says we've got 4 bedrooms and 1 bath. Well, we actually have 2 bedrooms in one unit, 2 bedrooms in another unit, 1 bath in each, but they're not connected. Okay, so this was a hard thing. When we bought this property, we wanted to live and die there, but I can't be buried and have my own family plot either in there. So this has been a hard decision. And we've had other things that have happened in my husband's life and my life. He's a physician, and we tried retiring 6 years ago, and that lasted, or 5 years ago, that lasted about 6 weeks. And so, but because we had sold our practice, we're down in South Jordan for a non-compete reason. As he retires and is getting ready to retire, this will put us 3 miles. We're going to buy my daughter's house, hopefully, if this can all go through. But as we considered the options, we actually chose this one because it will increase everyone's property values around us. It will be an increase in property tax for the city or the county. It's kind of a win-win. And as far as traffic, none of my neighbors complain when we were open to 89 and we had all the golfers racing around the corner to make it down to Valley View Golf Course in time. My daughter got hit backing out of the driveway. We've had so much traffic there, and now they've used a corner of our property for a cul-de-sac, which one of my neighbor's grandsons, who again isn't here, but they use it as drag racing now, and that might eat into that. But anyway, we are for it, and we've looked at J Development, and when I heard who's interested, and they've got attractive property. And again, in our opinion, this will be a win-win for everybody. It will increase property values around us. And my neighbor to the left, Julie, who has beautiful property, when I asked her about it at Smith's, I ran into her at Smith's, and she never shops at Smith's, so it's sort of providential. And so I said, I've been afraid to have this conversation with you, but this is what's going to happen. This is what we're proposing. Her comment was, I've been thinking the same thing. And then the little house right next to us, which began it all. In fact, the man who owned our property, this was all family property. He was born in that house. But he said, give my name to the developers. So it's interesting that everybody thought it was a good idea until it wasn't. So anyway, we are for it. And we think that it will be a good thing. And if we could, we would probably have bought one of the houses that are going to be built and stay there. But it's just too big for us right now. And the housing set up the way it is, it's just not conducive to that. So anyway, thank you again very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Always appreciate the applicants themselves speaking to the rezone request. Any further discussion from the public on this matter? Okay, maybe Chad, if you want to come up and I believe the questions were in relation to the town center, not necessarily development.
I think that's true, and you can correct me if that's wrong, but I think what the question was more about the development of the town center. We don't know the specific businesses that are going to go into that town center yet, but it is envisioned as a mixed-use town center. There will be a mix of business and residential in that area. There is a study that's started in the last 2 months. We will probably in the next couple of weeks, you'll see some notices for public participation in the public comment portion of that study. We want to get public input on that area in terms of the type of zoning and things that are appropriate there within the of course guidelines of the general plan, which is that is to be a town center. It is an interchange that was created as part of the Highway 89 project. I will say this about the particular project. We have a partner in the Utah Department of Transportation. They're the major landowner there as well, and their interest is to make sure that we have a project that does not create impacts that are not anticipated by what they've already designed. They don't want to have an interchange that does not function. They want their interchange to function well, and so they have a strong interest in making sure that whatever we do there is a good balance of appropriate levels of residential and commercial development that will allow that interchange to continue to function for years to come.
Thank you, Chad. bring it back to the council if there's no other public comments for a motion to close the public hearing and to take action on ordinance 2309.
Would we close the public hearing or just vote on that?
For there to be public hearings for each, so yeah.
Okay. I would like to ask Ms. Denholder, did your question get answered? Okay, because this property is, what they're talking about here is on Gentile, not Gordon's. Okay, so I'll move that we close the public hearing and that we adopt ordinance 23-09 for 2855 East Gentile Street, rezone.
I'll second it.
Councilmember Smith Edmondson has moved to close the public hearing and to approve ordinance 2309. It's been seconded by Councilman Morris. I'll take a roll call vote, starting with Councilman Thomas.
Is this an aye or a yes?
Whatever floats your boat.
Aye.
Yeah. Councilmember Smith Edmondson.
Aye.
Councilman Morris.
Aye.
Councilman Roberts.
Yes.
And I vote yes. The ordinance 2309, receiving 5 votes, passes unanimously. Our next item is ordinance 2308, which is in relation to some of our household pets and consistency with our municipal code. And Chad's going to discuss that as well.
Yeah, this is going to be very brief. As you remember, we recently adopted or entered into an agreement with Davis County to take care of our animal control services. As part of that, we adopted their animal control ordinances that guide the number of household pets. And we had some sections of our zoning ordinance that conflicted with that as a result of those changes. Either we had conflicts or they were just redundant, that we didn't need those sections of code anymore. So this particular text amendment is to repeal our household pets section of the code with one small change to that. There is a small section of that household pets that defines that farm animals are not household pets. So we moved that. We moved that section to our farm animals section of code, make sure that was clear in that code. There's also a couple of just little cleanup items to make sure that our kennel definitions match the recently adopted Davis County standards. So that is the gist of it. There was another effort, as we have been with all of our code amendments, to put some of our standards that were written form into a table format. That was, again, part of this proposal. But with that, this was reviewed by the Planning Commission at their April 25th meeting, and they did recommend unanimously that the council approve and adopt ordinance 2308, adopting these changes as described.
Thank you, Chad. Council, any discussion on this ordinance or questions for Chad?
Was there any change to the space requirements for the farm animals in any of the zones?
No, we put that in a table. We did make one clarification. There had been confusion in the past that this was somehow cumulative, that you could have, you could add up all these numbers and have a wide variety of animals. That was never the intent, so that's been changed to be clear that your square footage requirement is for, if you have, for example, a sheep, you have to have a certain number of square footage for one sheep. And then it does not also allow you to have a cow with a doubling up that square footage. You don't get to count that square footage twice, I guess is what that comes down to.
In other communities, I've heard the conversation of these miniature horses, miniature cattle. I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on that or have had that conversation where they're more the footprint of a sheep, a lamb maybe. Just curious.
We haven't had those conversations. We certainly could in the future. I'm sure they have a smaller impact, like you say.
Okay. No issue, no problem, but okay, thanks.
Anyone else? Chad, just one question. I mean, what particularly did it amend in this specific ordinance on household pets? Because I know that the county basically gave guidance that they would increase the number of allowable household pets. So is this just us getting in consistency with that?
Yeah, this is a lower number. We had listed in the code 2 as a limit, so that's not consistent with the Davis County ordinance. So that is really the majority of what we're doing, is taking those restrictions out that now don't apply.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right, this is a public hearing as well, so I'll entertain a motion to open the public hearing for ordinance 2308.
I make a motion we open the public hearing.
Councilman Roberts has motion to open the public hearing and seconded by Councilman Morris. All those in favor? Aye. Public hearing is now open, so feel free if you want to speak on ordinance 2308. You're free to come to the lecterns to discuss. Okay, seeing no public comment, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing and take action on ordinance 2308.
Mayor Pro Tem, I move that we close the public hearing and adopt ordinance 23-08.
Second.
Councilman Morris has moved to close the public hearing and to approve ordinance 2308. It's been seconded by Councilman Roberts. I'll take a roll call vote, beginning with Councilman Thomas.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith Edmondson.
Yes.
Councilman Morris.
Aye.
Councilman Roberts.
Yes.
And I vote no. So the ordinance passes, or ordinance 2308 passes with 4 votes in favor and 1 in opposition. That finishes our agenda items. Is there anything that the council would like to discuss or bring before the public body before we adjourn? No? All right, I will entertain a motion to adjourn, typically from Councilman Thomas.
Motion, Mayor Pro Tem.
Motion to adjourn?
To adjourn.
Seconded by?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned.